Does Stannis actually believe in the Red God? Does he believe he is Azor Ahai reborn? Or is he just using Melisandre as a means to an end? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover George R.R. Martin's world in full. Not just the main series, but also Dunk and Egg, House of the Dragon and more, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher too. There is no doubt that Stannis has allied himself to the Red God in his pursuit of power, and in particular to Melisandre. She is his closest advisor. He never disputes her claim that he is Azor Ahai reborn, and he even changes his house sigil to incorporate a flaming heart. But does he actually believe any of it, or is it just all about the power? We should probably start by pointing out that although we first meet Stannis after he has clearly aligned himself with Melisandre, to most people in the story, this is quite a new development and an unexpected one. While he was Lord of Dragonstone as King Robert's brother, most of the time he was in King's Landing as Master of Ships in Robert's small council, and he was very clearly not religious. It is only with the death of Jon Arryn and Robert's decision to ask Ned Stark rather than Stannis to become his new hand that Stannis heads back to Dragonstone. At Dragonstone, he discovers his wife Selyse a zealous convert to the Red God, and Melisandre established there with a power base. He was probably aware before that, but this was when he first came face to face with the impact and power of Melisandre. The prologue of A Clash of Kings takes place probably nearly a year later, by which time he has seemingly fully adopted the worship of the Red God, to the extent of burning the holy statues of the Seven. To outsiders, this must have seemed like a dramatic conversion. Davos, much closer to Stannis than most, actually gets to ask him what on earth is going on, and Stannis answers him quite openly. He starts by emphasising his general atheism. I stopped believing in gods the day I saw the Wind-Proud break up across the bay. Any gods so monstrous as to drown my mother and father would never have my worship, I vowed. In King's Landing, the High Septon would prattle at me of how all justice and goodness flowed from the Seven, but all I ever saw of either was made by men. So his starting position is not to believe in gods, plural. Not just the faith of the Seven, though he seems to hold that in particular low regard. And then he goes on to an analogy from his youth to explain where he was now. When I was a lad, I found an injured goshawk and nursed her back to health. Proudwing, I named her. She would perch on my shoulder and flutter from room to room after me and take food from my hand, but she would not soar. Time and again I would take her hawking, but she never flew higher than the treetops. Robert called her Weakwing. One day, our great-uncle Sir Harbert told me to try a different bird. I was making a fool of myself with Proudwing, he said, and he was right. Stannis Baratheon turned away from the window and the ghosts who moved upon the southern sea. The Seven have never brought me so much as a sparrow. It's time I tried another hawk, Davos, a red hawk. In other words, the faith of the Seven wasn't working for him in practical terms. He didn't get anything from it. And we're not just talking about gods, he means the religion as well. It didn't seem particularly effective. So, as religious power is important for kings, he might as well try something else. And from what he's seen of Melisandre, he's impressed. He goes on, half my knights are afraid even to say her name, did you know? If she can do nothing else, a sorceress who can inspire such dread in grown men is not to be despised. A frightened man is a beaten man. And perhaps she can do more. I mean to find out. Note here, though, that he doesn't say what her god can do, just what she can do. So whatever comes next in terms of his beliefs, Stannis here is clearly not a true believer. He has seen her power and the fear she inspires in people and thinks it useful, certainly more useful than what he's experienced in the Faith of the Seven. So he's willing to go along with her religious strictures in order to have that power at his side. He allows the burning of the carved statues of the Seven, changes his sigil and goes along with her proclaiming him Azor Ahai come again. And all the while, he thinks that he is using her, not the other way around. We can see this in his resistance to fully embracing the new faith, because he does definitely resist. She wants to go to the Battle of the Blackwater with him, and he says no, because he decides that it might make people think the victory was hers, not his. She wants to burn Edric Storm, and he equivocates, because Edric is his nephew and innocent of any crime, and so on. Do you remember when he told Davos that he meant to find out what more she could do? Well, that's basically the story of the next couple of books. Does he come around? Well, the deeper into the story we get, the more and more he clearly believes in her power. He equivocates quite a bit on the Shadow Babies, seemingly unwilling to say out loud that he had any role in it, saying it was just a dream and his hands were clean. In the books, in case you can't remember, the shadow that killed Renly looked like Stannis, and at that moment Stannis was asleep, but saw or experienced what happened, thrashing around on his bed and crying out, unable to be awoken. Dark stuff. Later, when Melisandre throws the 3 leeches on the fire, calling for the deaths of Balon Greyjoy, Robb Stark and Joffrey Baratheon, he is only convinced when all 3 have died. But then he did seem willing to let her have her way. Then, perhaps learning from previous mistakes, he allows her to come with him to the next battle after leaving her behind at Blackwater. That's the battle under the wall against the wildlings, where she burns Varamir's eagle out of the sky. So, by the end of A Storm of Swords, Stannis is absolutely convinced of Melisandre's power and usefulness, and he goes further in his public adherence to the faith. He is willing to allow wildlings south of the wall as long as they bend the knee to him and pledge allegiance to the Lord of Light. And offering Jon legitimacy and the title of the Lord of Winterfell brings with it a condition. He must burn down the weirwood tree at Winterfell. It's an oft-overlooked point here that this is one of the most important factors in Jon's decision. He doesn't want to turn against Ned's gods. I have no right, he thinks. Winterfell belongs to the old gods. Melisandre is doing the pushing on that point, but Stannis doesn't overrule her, and Jon clearly understood that that was the deal. Anyway, what about Stannis when Melisandre isn't there? After Jon is installed as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Stannis heads off to claim Winterfell for himself, on Jon's advice taking the long way around via the mountain clans and Deepwood Motte in the hope of picking up a few allies en route. During this trip, when Melisandre is left behind at Castle Black, Stannis keeps up the official trappings of a servant of the Lord of Light. He fights under the Fiery Heart banner. When people are put to death for rather horrible crimes, he orders them burned rather than hanged or executed, and keeps a night fire burning atop his makeshift headquarters building. But you can sense his growing understanding that as a king, he has a coalition to keep together, and that means a degree of cultural understanding. He already has the Faith of the Seven supported Davos as his Hand of the King, and when Jon informs him that burning down weirwoods would cost him the fealty of lots of Northern Lords, he noticeably doesn't then do that. There's also one rather frosty encounter between Stannis and some true believers who want to burn some sacrifices to appease the Red God and hopefully ease the weather conditions. We read that, "A sacrifice will prove our faith still burns true, sire," Clayton Suggs had told the king. And Godry the Giant Slayer said, "The old gods of the north have sent this storm upon us. Only R'hllor can end it. We must give him an unbeliever." "Half my army is made up of unbelievers," Stannis had replied. "I will have no burnings. Pray harder." That's not the voice of a man who is an absolute believer in the Lord of Light. It's a king trying to hold together a coalition, and frankly, doesn't much like burning people alive unless he has to. Fundamentally, Stannis is a pragmatist rather than a true believer. He believes in Melisandre because he has seen the evidence of her magic, but the Red God? No, not yet anyway. And him being Azor Ahai come again? Well, he's happy to go along with that for the time being too. When trying to persuade Jon to join him, he says that even Azor Ahai did not win his war alone, for example. But it's noticeable that it's mostly Melisandre introducing him as that, not him. I've often emphasised on this channel that in George R. R. Martin's writing, it is often the strength of someone's belief in something that is more important than the truth of what they believe. The fact that Melisandre believes absolutely that Stannis' Azor Ahai come again is what drives the action, not whether he actually is. And for Stannis, His absolute belief that drives his actions is not whether or not the Red God exists, it's his belief that he is the rightful king and it is his duty to claim the throne. Worshipping the Lord of Light and working with Melisandre is a means to that end. When in the north he realises that slavishly following the Red God would actually lose him much-needed supporters, he equivocates immediately. Put simply, Stannis is using Melisandre every bit as much as she is using him. If you'd like more videos diving into George R. R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire, please click on the playlist on the left of your screen now. Or to support this channel, you could click on the link to Patreon on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.